Welcome to the October 20th, 2017 edition of Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's get a quick take on the Denver City Council giving its initial approval to contract revisions for the new entry sign at DIA this week. Under the change, DIA will now spend $15 million versus $7 million, taking over the major financial responsibility from Panasonic due to federal highway laws now hampering the deal with the sign. Patty Calhoun from Westward. This sounds like a crazy deal. Did someone just not double check the laws that pertain to a sign on a highway?
They allege they checked the laws and there's some gray area, but what is not going to be gray is this gaudy sign, assuming it works. And it could be like the automated baggage system from when DIA was originally supposed to open. We could still have problems there. But don't forget that Denver now, as a compromise, gets to keep the revenue from the advertising. And I don't think everyone realized what we're going to have is some really big billboard advertising. What, Chick-fil-A, marijuana, I mean, whatever. Welcome to Colorado.
Welcome to Colorado, indeed. Roger Hudson, the proprietor of the Hudson firm, political consultant, former PIO, the Attorney General. What do you think are, I think when we travel as Denverites, we're Coloradans, we go to Las Vegas, we go to other big cities, we see cities known for big ads. I don't know if Denver is known for ads like this. Are we ready?
I don't think anybody's ready for this, right? I mean, you mentioned the Attorney General. All I see is a long line of lawsuits, right? I mean, it's just every car accident that happens along that way, it's like the sign made me do it. It lit up and I lost it, especially in the snow. I don't see it happening. I mean, I may be outnumbered here, but that's such a large piece to bite off of. I just don't think Colorado cares or wants that. I'd rather see the mountains, forget the sign.
Eric Sonneman joins us, political analyst. Eric, we have seen some other sponsorship opportunities related to the airport go awry. I'm not sure if they had to do it over again. The University of Colorado would put naming rights on the A line that may work, might not work, depending on the coin flip. Do you think this is going to be a popular selling point for the city of Denver now that it owns an enormous sign at DIA?
No, I think the $15 million price tag, I mean, that just leaves such a bad taste in so many voters and so many taxpayers' mouth that stuff like this, everyone wonders why we have Tabor, why is government held in such disrespect? It's because of anecdote after anecdote, just like this one. I cannot imagine anyone driving out on Pena Boulevard across the prairie and then all of a sudden looking at a sign saying, oh, this is DIA, that's where I'm headed. Why do we need a sign telling people where they're going? It is obvious where you're going. The airport's now been up for, what, 22 years or something like that? It's existed reasonably well without a $15 million sign. Maybe I'm just an old curmudgeon at this point, but I don't get it.
Natasha Gardner, articles editor with 5280. Are you surprised that this, at least for the initial approval, seemed to sail through the city council?
No, because they're kind of stuck with it now. We're already well along the way with this sign. I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack, though. I actually, now that we're here, the price tag is big, yes, but I'm interested to see how it works out. When they put the Union Station sign down, who can remember what that cost? I'm guessing it was not a small sum at the time. And now it's become an iconic image of what Denver is and who we are. IKEA is selling photographs of it. People have it in their homes. It's a point of pride for people. It's a branding and a logo. Could this sign be that? Who knows, but I'm willing to give it a chance. I think that DIA still suffers from the sense that it's like out in Kansas, that it's so far removed from the metro. And if you look at the designs of this, the long linear curve, like how it connects, it could be a line connecting to Denver. There's an artistic sort of argument to be made for connecting this DIA sign and the DIA complex to the greater Denver area. So I'm going to give it a chance.
I greatly appreciate your optimism, but I'm a little worried that if 100 years from now that sign is now on historic Denver postcards, we'll be living in some sort of Back to the Future Biff Tannen universe. But I'm hoping it turns out as rosy as you paint the picture. It's very nice. Election 2017 has commenced as voters in Colorado counties receive their mail-in ballots this week. Denver voters will decide school board races, a major bond package, and Initiative 300 that will require large new buildings to have rooftop gardens or solar panels. Aurora and Lakewood voters will decide contentious city council races. And for the Denverites out there trying to figure out all the different things on the Go ballot proposal, the latest Westward has a pretty good piece by Anna Campbell, all breaking it down. Patty, tell us more about that and what what we should expect from Denver voters this election.
Hard to tell what to expect from Denver voters right now. I think you can kind of divide their support on the Go bonds the way they feel about Amazon. There are a lot of people who say, city's growing too much, we should have taken care of some of these problems. Do we want to give the city a lot more money, although it'll come from bonds, arguably not from taxpayers directly? Do we want to give the city more money so we can grow more? So there's a backlash on a lot of these. It's divided between A through G. You don't have to vote for all of them, you can pick and choose. So one of the good ones is for the library. There's one for rec centers, really good one for Denver Health and a new facility there that is definitely needed. There's a question about the arts and culture districts, whether or not we should be giving the museums and some of the cultural institutions more money for more building when they already have the SCFD. But the responses we've gotten right now divide a lot along the Amazon lines. We want to grow or we don't. We're mad at the city or we're not. And so we're going to see a lot of action there. But in Denver, it is like a cakewalk compared to Douglas County over the school board. I mean, the fights going on in the suburbs are a lot more rowdy, except for Initiative 300, which is not going to make it here, the green roof one. And I would like to ask why Denver doesn't just rename the initiatives. Last time we voted for 300, it was pot. The time before that, it was a wage issue with restaurants. Before that, remember when we were supposed to have the Safety Through Peace initiative? That was also 300. They never quite go through.
That's a good point. The Initiative 300 seems like the kiss of death there. It's worse than a
well,
prediction
it worked
of
with
success
social media, the social marijuana consumption, except we still don't have any applications.
Good point. Good point. Roger, Patty brings up a lot of great points, especially the battles going on in the suburbs. I'm a suburbanite myself. I'm seeing all the handwritten notes on the back of SUVs in Douglas County saying which school board people to vote for. Right. Are you expecting some bigger rifts to come from some of these? The school board is a big deal in Douglas County. It's that way in a lot of places. Do you think we're going to see some impact from these races?
Oh yeah, especially the school board races. The Douglas County school board races. It's a monstrous ripple of what comes out if the conservatives lose that board. There are so many things that are already in play that conservatives are really excited about. The biggest being the Blaine Amendment, going in front of the Supreme Court, looking for some clarification with that. If a less conservative board comes in, and all I have to do is lose one seat, it means that goes away. The Attorney General doesn't get to go to D.C. and argue that case. I know she wants to do that. I know conservatives are also looking to figure out some sort of clarity on what kind of money is in play from public money funds to be able to put into public schools that don't have anything to do with religion. So making that definition is going to be really important. It's something that's really it's bringing a lot of money in. Matter of fact, I just read something that was $700 million now from the unions have been put into Douglas County alone. So I think we're not done. We've got a couple weeks, right, still before we see the end of that, I think.
Yeah, but then the mail-in ballots kind of create this huge election day stretch where it's, the 3-week election day. Erica, there's a lot to choose from here. You have big proposals in Denver about our growth. Aurora, which really I think over the next couple of decades is going to be vying with Denver about the influence of the whole metro area. A city council, pretty contentious city council races, and everything with school board. Take your pick. What should we be noted of?
I'll go in a totally different direction. I sit here, it's October 20th. I flash back on October 20th a year ago and where we were getting ready to elect President Hillary Clinton. And, what has become of the last year when that didn't happen. I think a year ahead to October 20th, 2018, when we will have multiple statewide ballot issues and a very heated, contested race for who's going to be the next governor of Colorado. So I'm sort of enjoying the respite. Yes, we have an election here, but as elections go, it is certainly quieter than what we've experienced or quieter than what will come next. In Denver, I hear Patty in terms of the bond issues and how this has sort of catalyzed some of the Amazon pro and Amazon con along those dividing lines. these bonds always seem to go through. Well, whoever the mayor is at the time puts them up every 6 or 8 or 10 years. Last time was Hickenlooper's A through I proposal. They all went through. The cultural facility one was a little closer, but they all passed. I have a line I've used on this show before that, you know, for liberal Denver voters, the more you tax yourself, the closer to God. And I do think, even though there is more pushback and Amazon has catalyzed it, I expect those to go through. I think the school board races, whether it's in Denver, whether it's in Aurora, obviously the one in Douglas County, which is very, very heated, to the extent we have heat and fire in this election, I think it is largely around those school board elections, and the stakes are high in terms of the reform-oriented direction. Now, what reform looks like in Douglas County is very different than what it looks like in DPS, but most of these districts have taken a reform, choice-minded approach, and that approach is very much at stake in these elections.
Natasha, Eric's right. I mean, even with the contentious races in Douglas County, election 2017 is probably one of the more civilized elections we've seen in a while. What should we take away from all the different races and all the different ballot issues that are out there right now?
Well, I think the key one to focus on, at least from my perspective, is the Denver School Board right now. That race could have huge implications on the city, and it's just, we always talk about all politics being local. Like, it doesn't get any more local than school board, but it sets a standard for the city. It's how we attract people to move here. It's how we attract families to stay. It's how we raise a really smart and effective workforce. So this race has 10 candidates for 4 different slots. The board has been pretty much in, I guess, in kumbaya status for a long time. So having a few different candidates actually win this election would change those votes. It would be less of a 7-0 situation, which is typically what happens there. I've had an opportunity to actually interview each of the candidates. What's interesting is they start from a point of all wanting to take care of kids and having the best schools possible. That makes sense. After that, it gets very, very different. They have different ideologies of how to approach that, ways that they want this to happen, things they think DPS is doing right, and things that need to change. Where they also do all come back together, though, is emphasizing how important this election is for people to vote in, because of all those reasons I mentioned: the workforce, the communities, our neighborhoods, what this means for the city as a whole. So it's one of those things that goes under the radar. We don't think of school board that often, but this is an important election for people to turn in their ballots on election day.
Is all those interviews available on the website?
As soon as I can file it next week.
All right. So tune in next week to see there's plenty of sources for that information. Let's get to our next topic. Third quarter campaign finance numbers for the 2018 gubernatorial race were released this week. Mike Johnston leads among Democratic candidates with $725,000, while Republican Victor Mitchell has $2 million in cash on hand. Total fundraising numbers have already reached close to $10 million for all candidates. Roger, we just got done talking about election 2017, right, which means it's time to talk about election 2018.
Hard to imagine, right?
Exactly. Yeah. With Michael Johnston holding that kind of I'm not sure if I call it an edge. When you're up against Jared Polis, you can't really have a money edge.
Right.
But does it show that he's still a force to be reckoned with if, with all these people still joining the race, he's still able to raise decent numbers?
Yeah, because I think the numbers that even you just said, Victor, all the money that you just talked about from Victor is his own money. Right. He's putting that in, and Jared's the same way. He's putting that in. Mike has actually raised this himself. He's gone out and made the calls. Somebody else who's doing very well is Donna Lynn. More so than I thought. She has, she's moving forward as a business type candidate versus a healthcare type candidate, trying to push out in front of John's shadow. She's doing really well. I expect her in the next quarter to do even better. The really surprise for especially Republicans is George Brockler, somebody who has as much of a footprint as he has, who's been as popular as he's been. He raised less than $100,000. He has no money on hand, no cash money on hand. Why he can't inspire a base to come out and support, nobody can really figure it out. Nobody on the Republican side is doing anything like what you're seeing currently for Johnson. Good example there with Mike. The only one's doing that, and he's doing it kind of an interesting way, and that's Stapleton. And all that big money is going into a PAC. And so he's kind of sucked all the air out of the room with that. So it's all this kind of dark money that we're not seeing that's not going to be able to be spent by him, but by PACs and outside of him. I think it's going to be really interesting when we see all the spending. We could see a $20 million race here in Colorado. Easy.
Eric, what do you think from what we can gauge right now? I get it that we are literally over a year away from the election, but with the Democrats, at least right now, looking at a bruising primary, it seems that they're going to need more money because it's going to be tough. What do you see from the tea leaves, from the financial tea leaves we're seeing so far?
We spend all our time at this point a year out on those financial tea leaves because it's the only thing we can measure at this point. There are no votes, there are no caucuses, there's nothing else to measure. Sometimes I think the story is overplayed on money. Money is the mother's milk, don't get me wrong. It's critically important, but all these numbers are paltry numbers compared to the check that Jared Polis can write, in the 10 seconds it takes him to write himself a check. All of the numbers on the Democratic side strike me as sufficient to run a meaningful competitive campaign. Roger's right about Donald Lynn. Roger's right about Mike Johnston. Kerry Kennedy this week came out with an impressive list of endorsements. It was a more robust list than I expected out of her at this point in the campaign. They are all competitive candidates. I can make a plausible case for really any of them winning the nomination if it breaks right. But Jared Polis still has that inside track with the combination of the unlimited checkbook and the Bernie Sanders appeal. Don't forget two things, Dominic. One is both of these primaries, but particularly on the Democratic side, you're not going to be won with 50% plus one. If in 4 or 5-way primaries, somebody's going to get a ticket to the November election with 30% of the vote, plus or minus 2, 3, 4 points, if that pie gets sliced in fairly even substantial shares. Secondly, this is really continues to be a commentary about the fallacy of what we call campaign finance reform. And in the governor's race, the contribution limits are so low that you have to spend so much of your time. So all these candidates, instead of being out about around the state, meeting voters, they're spending it in a small room, dialing for dollars, because they can only take, I don't know what the limit is, $400 or $500 at a crack. And the real meaningful money in this race is going to be what Roger referred to as the dark money. And yes, Walker's doing it a little bit more public than I might recommend, but all of these campaigns are going to have their dark money affiliate, which is raising the big bucks.
Natasha, what should we take away from the financial numbers we've seen so far?
I think it's just the start. There's going to be so much money that rolls into this race, and for good reason. There's a lot at stake, both locally but nationally as well. In reference to sort of these big groups, the PAC, I did a little research this morning, and I was looking at the names. We have things like Frontier Fairness, Colorado Strong, Better Colorado Now, and I'm just wondering who names these things. They have this sort of powerful statement that you'll never remember, and I think that's part of the intention. And if anything, as I was looking at that this morning, it was a reminder of how the media has a call to duty here to look into these groups, to help readers and viewers have a better understanding of what their purposes are, who they are supporting, how much money is going into those races, and then maybe suggest some better names.
I can tell you, I've named my own PAC. It's the Coloradans in Favor of Good Things. So I mean, it's very definitive. Like yes, exactly. Penny, wrap it up
television.
For us. And public television, yes.
I think it's a Ouija board, actually. It just sounds like they've kind of mixed and matched, or those little refrigerator magnets. It's not just how much money is going to be raised, although it's astonishing amounts. It's how it's going to be spent, because we've certainly seen campaigns in Colorado that have blown through a lot of cash with really stupid messages. And I think we still haven't seen the message that is going to grab the 30 or 34% of the voters. We haven't seen who's going to catch fire yet. The other thing is, with that dark money, there's a lot less control over what the messages are. So you're going to have the candidates have their own message out there, good, bad, indifferent, and then you're going to have a lot of negative ads that are done by those PACs that could go in any direction. So I think we're going to see a really, really ugly campaign. Expensive and ugly.
Expensive and ugly. That does sound like election. That's a good definition of that. Senator Michael Bennet sent a letter to the U.S. Accountability Office this week requesting an investigation into the operations of President Trump's Election Integrity Commission. Joined by Senators Cory Booker and Amy Klobuchar, the letter claims the commission's handling of voter information may cause further problems with the public's trust in the system. Eric, I know you're shocked by this kind of a claim with this, but does this kind of a letter go any further than just a headline and something to talk about on CIO?
No, it's a headline, it's a topic for discussion around this table and around other tables. I don't think anyone in the White House or anyone at that commission is all of a sudden revamping their process because Bennett and Booker and Klobuchar sent a letter. It showed, I mean, election integrity can be a legitimate issue. In Colorado, all the statistics have shown that any problems are really at the margin. And yes, anyone voting illegally or any half dozen or dozen people voting illegally is a problem, but it's hard to point to any elections they have tipped. Perhaps in some other cities around the country, I'm thinking of Milwaukee, I'm thinking of St. Louis, obviously Chicago historically, where there have been problems of scale, and in Colorado the problems aren't of scale. But it seems like whatever the Trump administration touches, even if it is a legitimate or quasi-legitimate issue, they take all the legitimacy out of it, and it just becomes polarized and hateful and another soundbite, which is what this is.
Natasha, your quick take on Michael Bennett's letter.
Well, I think one of the things that's surprising for me is sort of this question of why did 5,000 Coloradans withdraw their ID registration? And I'm just at this point, between all the various ways we've been hacked and lost information, that this was the one that they were really worried about.
Not the 143 million Equifax people. It's this. Got it. Patty, what do you think about this letter, and any possibility that it makes any difference?
Well, it's not going to make any difference, but I like registering that we had problems with the fact that they were demanding this information and accusing Colorado. Let's remember back when, before we ever thought Trump would be president, that he was talking about the rigged system in Colorado back in April before the primary. You know, Colorado was pinpointed as a corrupt, rigged state, and then we later found out there was no corruption, there was no rigging, unless, of course, it's coming from Equifax and Russia. So let's quit worrying about D.C. and just make sure our systems have some protection against the outside world.
Roger, wrap it up for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's significant that there were 5,000 on this topic, as you said, that decided they were going to pull the registration to vote in Colorado. I think as a state that we're trying to figure out, are we Republican, are we Democrat, are we independent? I think it's significant as we move into this next election cycle. I think it shows that there's a real pushback on any kind of intervention in our system and how we elect our candidates. And I really think it's a flag going up the pole that we're going to see some voters that are going to surprise us, especially in an independent way coming up in 2018.
It's time for a very, very favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. And as always, Ms. Calhoun, please start us off.
The Cub Scout troop in Broomfield that has booted Ames Mayfield because he asked some questions of Vicki Marble. Now, Vicki Marble has been a disgrace around this table many times over the past, over some of her ill-thought-out comments in the legislature and outside the legislature, and she made some to this Cub Scout troop when they were working on their civics merit badge, or whichever one it was, including having a very revisionist history of an incident that took place about Southern eating habits, let's just say that. And she denied that it had happened, blamed the media, because of course, who wouldn't? But all that aside, and then the mother of Ames, who also was very handy in taping all this and making it available, punish the parents, punish the legislator, but you do not punish the Cub Scout for asking questions.
Hard to imagine what kind of merit badge he'd be receiving for this kind of experience. Roger.
You know, I'm really, and I live in Douglas County, so full disclosure with that, I'm really unhappy with how the unions have played their role in the school board election there in Douglas County. They came out originally, just like they did in Jeffco the last time we went through this, saying that they were not going to place any direct money into those races where they were going to advocate for certain candidates. Well, now we're seeing that with the last disclosure that they had put in $300,000 to influence this election in a local school board election. Now we're seeing spending near $700,000 today. We're seeing those kind of buys in radio and television and print. I just think it's just so dishonest not to be right up front with how you're spending your money and where you're spending it and what you're advocating for. So I'm a little unhappy with the unions on this case.
Dishonesty in politics, Roger.
Imagine that, right? Doggone it.
Well, I'll stay with the theme, but instead of in Douglas County, I'll go to the DPS school board election. Got this mailer the other day trying to link Barbara O'Brien to Betsy DeVos, even making the pictures look somewhat similar.
Barbara O'Brien?
Now, anyone who knows Barbara O'Brien, former lieutenant governor of the state.
With Bill Ritter.
With Bill Ritter's lieutenant governor a handful of years ago. Yes, is Barbara O'Brien an ed reformer? Whatever that word means, yes, she is. But anyone who tries to link her to Betsy DeVos, it's beyond the pale. Yes, politics is mean, it's nasty, and it's getting worse. But this kind of guilt by association, the only way you're going to end it is to not vote for it. And if you vote for it, you'll see more of it.
Natasha.
This is more of an update to a disgrace that has often been at this table. There was a report that came out today about body cam usage. They did a study in D.C. looking at whether it changed officers' reactions, more use of force, more complaints against them. The fact is, it was less than anyone thought it would be. They thought it would be a bigger thing, that if people were watching, the police would act differently. This doesn't mean body cam should be just shelved and collect dust in the equipment room, but it does change the idea that it was a quick fix to make policing 2.0 sort of in the country. It's an interesting story.
Helpful but not a panacea. Say something nice about somebody, Patty?
Roger Armstrong, the longtime head of Capitol Hill United Neighborhoods, passed away. He did a great job for the city.
Roger.
You know, I'm sorry of how it's happened, but I'm glad to see that the Gold Star moms and parents are now getting some good positive attention. I don't like how it happened, but I do like seeing when I walk through an airport that once again we're seeing military people pulled to the side and thanked for their service. So the outcome, I think I'm very happy with. How we got here, not so much.
Eric.
I've been meaning to do this for a few weeks. There's a new shared workspace in town, particularly targeted at women and working women. It's called WIK, Women in Kind, founded by Virginia Santee and a close friend of mine, Melanie Yulee. I think it's great entrepreneurship. It's up in Northeast Denver, and it's really getting traction.
Natasha.
It's great. I've been there to check it out. Just really quickly, I would say that I don't like how we got there either, but the conversations that have happened in the last few weeks about violence against women, sexual violence against anyone, are important things that needed to happen, and hopefully change can happen.
You're here. That's all the time we have for this edition of Colorado Inside Out. I want to remind you that next week is the big premiere of Colorado Inside Out 25 Years. It's our documentary about this very program, featuring some great vintage footage, interviews with panelists, and some bigwigs here in Colorado, and of course, some awesome behind-the-scenes stories. That's next Friday right here on Channel 12 at 7 p.m. and again at 9 p.m. For everyone here at CPT 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching. Good night.